When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA. This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
Hello and welcome to this special episode of Disturbed. These stories were voted on by our Patreon and selected as the best reads from last month's episodes. If you want to weigh in for next month's best of, join the Patreon at the link in the description. Without further ado, let's get to our first story.
I've had a lot of scary and paranormal things happen to me, usually because I've always lived in older houses growing up. While they were all scary, nothing beats this experience I had back when I was 10. My family and I were in between houses, and my great-grandfather told my parents that my family could live in his empty house. He was in a retirement home and not going back to his house. I'd been there a bunch growing up, and there was never anything too bad, maybe just some weird noises from empty rooms like knocking or things falling over. However, when we moved in, things got a little scarier. I don't know why, but we were only allowed to live on the first floor, and we could also use the basement. The second floor was off limits to us. Honestly, I never liked the second floor. I really started to hate it when the door that led to the stairs would open overnight. At the time, it was really scary, but now that I'm older, I wonder if it was just my parents being snoopy. But this isn't about the second floor. This is about the basement. I hated the basement. It was a mostly finished basement with doors leading to other rooms. The only working lights were the one above the stairs and the one in the main area of the basement. They were those single bulb lights that you have to pull a string to turn on. Whenever I went down there, usually when I was alone, it just felt off. It felt like something bad would happen or that someone was watching me. Well, one day, my mom asked me to go down to the basement to grab something from the deep freezer we had down there. I walked down the stairs and everything was normal. That feeling was still there, but it wasn't any worse than usual. I got to the deep freezer and opened it. From behind me, I heard something fall from one of the side rooms. I panicked, but kept on looking for what my mom asked for. As soon as I found it, I shit you not, I heard footsteps behind me and I booked it to the stairs. I didn't even close the deep freezer. I ran up the stairs, and as I was running, I heard something following me up the stairs, like really loud, booming footsteps. I reached the basement door and tried to open it, but it was stuck. My little 10-year-old body was slamming against the door, trying to get it open as the footsteps got louder. After about 10 seconds, I finally got the door open and slammed it shut behind me. I heard just one loud bang from the other side, like someone punched the door. Like any child would, I went crying to my mom about what happened, and she told my dad. He looked through every nook and cranny of that basement and found nothing. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was left open. It was just as it was before my great-grandfather moved out. Safe to say, I never went into that basement alone again. To this day, I still have a slightly irrational fear of basements.
Our next story is narrated by the talented Gregory James. The Voices in the Trees.
This is the story of an experience I had in Cradle Mountain National Park in Tasmania, Australia, in my early teens. Despite causing no physical injury, it has haunted me into adulthood. I grew up in a family of avid hikers. Both my mother, a botanist, and my father, a biologist for the University of Tasmania, would regularly visit the deepest wilderness areas of Tasmania during their field studies. These trips were disguised as camping and hiking adventures for the family. I never minded, as I was just as passionate about the outdoors as they were, even from a young age. Keyword being was, as after what I went through, even 20 plus years later, I still refused to return. We lived on a property a short driving distance from Lake St. Clair, a popular tourist destination. This was the only place my parents would allow me to camp and experience the wilderness alone, as long as I brought my German Shepherd with me. He was a former police dog and very well trained. At 12 or 13 years old, I didn't mind. It felt like my own little slice of freedom, in my own little slice of wilderness, despite being surrounded by people. It was easy to ignore him. But as I got older and more brazen, I found myself hounding my parents to let me take my quad bike deeper into the park to camp, to test my own abilities and prove to them that I was capable of doing so and that I wasn't a little kid anymore. It was that overconfidence that led me to the situation that caused me this trauma. I was 15 at the time, at the age where I thought I was invincible, knew all there was to know, and was untouchable. After asking my parents for what felt like countless times and being told no just as many times, I'd had enough and decided to just go. I told my parents that I and a few friends were going to the lake to camp and to do some fishing over the weekend. Instead, I took my tent and my quad bike and headed into the reserve alone. I left just after sunrise to maximize daylight and to make it as far in as I felt comfortable. Upon arrival, I set up camp, had some food, and decided to go explore. I knew of a spot nearby with a gorgeous rock face where fossils had been found in the past, so I thought I'd try my luck. Shortly into the walk, I realized I'd been turned around and had no idea where I was anymore. At the time, I didn't see it as that big of a deal, as I had a compass and knew that if I headed south, it would take me back to the lake and could walk from there. However, by this time, it was getting late in the afternoon, so stupidly, I decided to try my chances and make it back to my camp and quad bike so I wasn't walking back to camp from the lake in the dark. Big mistake. It was about 4:30 p.m., and the sun had begun to dip below the tree line, casting dark shadows across my walking path. That's when the forest went silent. And when I say silent, I mean silent. No wind, no birds, no forest sounds at all, which made my heart rate skyrocket. It was getting dark, and the silence was suffocating. I just wanted to get back to my camp, light a fire, eat some snacks, and spend my night watching nature's television until I fell asleep. That's when, from every direction, I heard the sound of twigs cracking and something moving in the canopy above me. No big deal, probably birds or other small animals, I thought. But then, as clear as day, someone said, "Hey, come here." At first, I felt relieved, as I thought someone along the trails had seen me, noticed I was a bit disheveled, and wanted to help. But looking around, I saw no one, Then it happened again, but behind me this time. The same voice, but I realized it was coming from up in the trees. I responded, "I can't see you. Where are you?" and asked for some help because I thought I just couldn't see the person calling out. But then it happened again, from my left this time. That's when I decided to run. I took off into the brush and ran for a good 2 minutes before I stopped to catch my breath and look at my compass to start making my way towards the lake. I was terrified, but I felt I had covered enough distance that I wasn't in immediate danger. But seconds after checking my compass and starting to walk, I heard it again, this time right behind me. "Hey, come here." I spun around and saw absolutely nothing, so I began sprinting again and didn't stop. The last thing I heard before bursting out of the trees onto the lakefront was the most evil, demonic laugh I had ever heard. It sounded like 3 people laughing at once. I immediately called my parents to come and get me, told them what I did and what happened, but they were more focused on my disobedience than my experience. The moment they picked me up was the first time I felt relief, and I cried the whole drive home. I didn't sleep properly for days. My dad went and picked up my quad and tidied up my camp. Since that day, I haven't stepped foot away from the lake. It took my passion from me. I miss being out away from society, but I can't bring myself to do it again.
Our next story is told by Dan DeGrow and was sent in by disturbed listener Pranjal. If you'd like to submit your own true scary story, visit disturbedpodcast.com/submit. A simple children's game turns dangerous.
When I was about 12, something terrifying happened to me. We lived in an old house in India, which was once a small school owned by my grandparents. Around 50 to 60 years ago, there were many such small schools, and as our family grew, we eventually turned that school building into our home. Behind the house, there was a large sloped area, kind of a hard mound of dirt. It was the size of about 7 or 8 rooms, with large trees scattered around, especially near the top. These trees cast eerie shadows, especially at sunset, and added to the spooky atmosphere of the place. One evening, close to sunset, my younger cousin and I were playing there. We came up with a game of bravery to run up the mound, touch the wall behind the trees, and run back down as fast as we could. It was already getting dark, so the atmosphere felt even more ominous. Being the older one, I went first. I wasn't scared. After all, I had lived in that old house my entire life. I confidently ran up, touched the wall, and turned to head back down. But as I was running down the mound, I heard footsteps in the dried grass behind me. At the same time, my younger cousin started screaming at the top of his lungs. At first, I thought he was just trying to scare me, but then I felt it. Someone grabbing my jacket from behind. It was dark, and it didn't even occur to me how I hadn't noticed anyone there before. I froze. My cousin, terrified, ran toward the house, leaving me alone with the stranger holding on to me. I screamed for help as loudly as I could, struggling to free myself, but it was no use. The person started pulling me back toward the trees. That moment of realization, of being dragged into the darkness, still gives me chills. I mustered all my strength, pushed back as hard as I could, and somehow managed to break free. I rolled down the mound, scratching my back, arms, and legs on the rough surface. Without looking back, I ran straight home. When I got there, I found my younger cousin crying in his room. He couldn't even explain what he'd seen. He was only 9 at the time and too overwhelmed to speak. My parents, on the other hand, were more concerned about the scratches on my body than listening to what had happened. They brushed it off, saying it must have been a tree branch that caught my jacket. But even now, as an adult, I know what I felt. That night, someone grabbed me. The memory of being pulled toward those trees into the dark is something I'll never forget.
Our final story is narrated by Tara Ash from Reddit user Skippy Uber. The only photo you're getting today is a mugshot.
This happened back in October, and it was the most in danger I've ever felt in my life. I work at a typical photo studio that's placed within a retail store in a mall. Not going to name which store, but your first guess is probably correct. On this particular day, I was scheduled to work our closing hours, 3 to 7. Unless there's an oversaturation of appointments on a particular day, there's usually just one employee working at a time. The studio is in the basement of the 2-floor retail store tucked away in a little back corner. On this particular day, as I was coming in to close the studio, my manager Stephanie and another coworker were there, and they were both getting off at 3:30. I clocked in and started chatting with Stephanie about the upcoming appointments. There was one family currently in the camera room, and they were running a little behind. Stephanie told me about my assigned family and also encouraged me to get what's called a pull-in. That's basically where we try to get customers from the retail store to come take photos in whatever they're wearing in exchange for 2 free photos. As we were talking, I noticed a man wearing what looked like a prison uniform and holding a crowbar. It definitely didn't look real, though. It looked like a costume. It was October, so it wasn't crazy that he was wearing a costume. It wasn't that close to Halloween, though, so I thought it was a bit weird, since he didn't have an appointment and was wandering around the practically barren area of the store next to the studio. I don't think Stephanie noticed how oddly he was acting because she asked him if he wanted to come in for some photos. She mentioned he already had the costume, so it would be perfect. I wasn't paying close attention to their conversation as I was checking in the next family for their appointment. Stephanie walked by as I was heading in to set up the studio and let me know that the guy was interested in photos after this appointment. The family I was working with was great and things went smoothly, but I noticed during the session that the strange guy had sat on the bench right next to the photo studio. No big deal. This bench is usually used for parents to set down their belongings, but it's not like he was expected to know that. Stephanie popped into the photo room one last time before she left and said, "Hey, I'm getting some weird vibes from that guy you're gonna photograph, so I'm gonna have Andrew come by and check to make sure everything's all right." After taking the photos, it takes a few minutes for me to edit them. The family went and sat down on the bench to wait while I stayed in the camera room touching up the photos. At this point, the guy walked into the studio and asked me when it was his turn. I then noticed that his crowbar was real, not a prop. The way he was swinging it around started making me nervous. I told him I could help him in a minute and go wait outside the studio. He sat back down on the bench and folded over himself. He'd nod off, then snap back up all of a sudden. I'm not stupid and knew he was on drugs. It was just me, him, and a single mom with her 2 children. I stopped paying attention to my editing and started paying attention to him. I could tell he was making this family uncomfortable. He started waving around the crowbar dangerously, and I became concerned about the glass walls as well as my own safety. He walked back into the studio a few times and wouldn't take no for an answer. He kept barging in and asking, "When are you gonna take my picture?" with a horrifying, dead look on his face. I finally finished editing the family's photos and was practically shaking at the checkout. The mom I was working with clocked the situation pretty quickly. The guy kept peering over our shoulders at the computer trying to see her photos. She asked loudly, "Can I help you?" The guy just rambled about how he was supposed to be getting his picture taken. She whispered to me, asking if I was okay, but I was sure he could hear her. I took out their appointment paper and started talking to her about the price, but on the paper, I wrote that the guy wasn't leaving and that my manager, Andrew, was nowhere to be seen. At this point, it had been an hour and a half since Stephanie and my other coworker had left. Usually, someone wouldn't wait around that long to get their photo taken. Instead, they'd leave and come back at the time we told them. The mom was on edge as I completed her transaction. I felt completely paralyzed. I was one card swipe away from being alone in this tiny studio with a crazy, drugged-out man with a real metal crowbar. I went to scan her card with our machine, and by the grace of God, her card didn't go through in our system. If the card won't scan on the local system, we have to reprint the transaction and check out at a regular register inside the store. I saw this moment as an out. I grabbed the printed transaction and walked her over to the registers in our salon. The second I was out of that man's eyesight, I burst into tears. I explained what was happening to one of the salon guys. He immediately paged Andrew and asked me if I'd like to wait in the salon. I gladly agreed. The mom who was helping me throughout the whole experience told me afterwards that there was no way she was going to leave me alone with him no matter what. That was very reassuring to hear. I had to wait patiently for them to kick him out. Andrew grabbed another guy and they both went to confront the man. After about 15 minutes, I peeked out to see if the guy had left the studio, and to my relief, he was gone. Thank God I didn't have any other appointments that night, but I still had to sit alone in the studio for the rest of the evening. Every time the elevator dinged, it startled me a bit. It took a while to recover from this, and I still get uneasy working alone sometimes. I think the scariest part of all is the part I didn't see. About 45 minutes after the incident, Andrew came by to check on me. I asked him about the guy and how kicking him out went. He told me that the man became absolutely furious, causing a complete scene. He threw his crowbar to the ground right next to Andrew. After getting mall security over to help, they successfully escorted him out. Frankly, I was pretty pissed at Stephanie for leaving me alone to deal with this guy, since she was the one who suggested he get his picture taken in the first place. I don't think she saw it as escalating that far, but that's not really an excuse. I was also mad that Andrew hadn't come to check out the situation right away after Stephanie had asked him to. He even asked me if I had asked the guy to leave. He's a fully grown man and I'm a petite teenage girl. The situation was entirely mishandled. When I told my mom and boyfriend about it, they were both pissed. I've been job hunting since I no longer feel comfortable working alone in a store that put me in such a vulnerable position.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at DisturbedPodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producer is Elizabeth Flood. Our sound designer and audio engineer is Nathan Corson. Executive producers Bridget Coyne and Noah Fouts. Until next time, stay safe out there.
Do you enjoy science, spooky stories, and all things paranormal? We do too.
While we would love for most paranormal stories to be true, we are here to tell you that they probably aren't. But that doesn't make them any less fun to speculate about.
We are the Spooky Science Sisters podcast. In this podcast, we bring you bi-weekly discussions on possible scientific explanations behind the supernatural. Backed up by research articles and other credible sources, we do deep dives into things like archaeology and physics and share in-depth discussions with topic experts.
Visit us at SpookyScienceSisters.com to listen to a couple of skeptics debunk some of your favorite alien encounters, cryptid sightings, and ghost stories with science, sass, and a significant amount of laughter.
Thank you, and stay spooky.